I fell out of love. I wanted something different. For me, I'm such a heart-centered, passionate person, and the game that I signed up for without knowing initially had changed so much that I was no longer having fun. And I was no longer interested in doing what I was doing every single day. And for me, if that's the case, it's time to do something different. I had learned so much. I always say that YumButter was like my entry ticket to the game. It really beat me up so bad that I'm like, okay, cool. I feel like I was initiated. It took me 14 years to get initiated, but I felt like, okay, that I needed to go through that in order to do what it is that I'm going to do. For the first time, I was getting depressed. I was like, I don't even know who this guy is. And to me, that's the first indicator that I need to do something different.
Welcome to the Seven Hats Podcast. My name is Yuval Selik, and I've been on the entrepreneurial roller coaster for over 20 years. I've experienced it all throughout my journey: the grind, burnout, failure, and ultimately, success. The turning point for me was realizing that building a successful company is meaningless if you neglect the other significant areas of your life. So today, I'm inviting you to join me on an adventure through those 7 areas, what I call the 7 hats. Every week, my guests and I will drop valuable insights and pearls of wisdom, helping, motivating, and inspiring you to get your 7 hats in order and deliver real impact with meaning. So let's get going. Welcome, 7 Hatters. In this episode, we speak with Matt Demore and dive deep into hats 1, 3, 4, and 7, the soul, servant, entrepreneur, and seeker, as we take a 15-year integrative journey from CPG to CVO. Matt is now the CVO, the Chief Vision Officer of Subtle Distinctions, a company helping entrepreneurs and leaders make thoughtful decisions that generate massive impact. He's a visionary on a mission to improve the lives of others. As an entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience, he is passionate about supporting and growing mission-based companies and creating more goodness worldwide. Matt began his entrepreneurial journey as a founder of YumButter, a better-for-you CPG brand. And through many years of getting kicked in the nuts, he developed his superpowers in coaching others on how to eat, move, and be happy, branding strategy, business growth, development, and execution. With 3 successful startups, including 2 national brands, Matt has some incredible golden nuggets to share. So if you're ready to create more goodness in the world and still leave a legacy, let's welcome Matt to the 7 Hats. Matt, welcome to the 7 Hats.
Thank you so much, Yuval. Thank you.
You know, you and I share a long history. We first met around 2010, I believe, in Air One, which is an incredible holistic and natural organic retailer in Los Angeles, for those who don't know. You know, when you enter Air One, you find every self-proclaimed guru, Peloton missionary, and yoga works mama, right, within a 20-mile radius, ready to spend their big bucks on the most incredible and highest quality products that money can buy. I mean, it's a really interesting store. Yeah. But back then, I believe I was demoing my skincare product, Luvala, with my wife, and you were demoing your brand. I think it was a granola brand, or maybe it was YumButter. Was it granola or YumButter?
It was the first. It was Cereal Revolution was the brand, and that was my first take at putting something into the marketplace in the natural food industry.
Yeah, so that was it. And I remember because I tasted it, and obviously sampling works because we got connected, and you were you were testing my skincare, so we connected, right? And we kept in touch ever since. We even worked together with my company ProMesh, where we helped you manage your field marketing program for a few years. Now,
absolutely,
I'm very excited though to have you on the show because you're such a stand-up guy. You really are, and someone who exudes and practices pretty much the entire lineup of the 7 Hats. So when asking you to be a guest on the podcast, I really was hoping that we can cover as many hats as time will allow us. So, you know, because the thing is, you have such a breadth of knowledge and experience, and I believe our 7 Hatters will gain some incredible insights from our conversation. Now, before we go there though, my belief is that the person we are today sprouted from the person we used to be. And so I'd love to go back and start with the following. Okay. Where were you born and how was your childhood like?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So fundamentally believe in that path as well, Val. So I was born in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, which is a suburb of Milwaukee. It's about halfway between Milwaukee and Madison for anyone who knows Wisconsin geography. And at about age of, I think it was 9, my family moved up to this very small town called Wisconsin Dells. And it's a tourist trap that was for people of Chicago for the most part. At that point in time, it was very seasonal. And so there was a working season of Memorial Day to Labor Day. And my parents were in the hospitality industry. So a big part of my coding or my upbringing lied in understanding how to take care of people and how to be of service, and also like establishing a pretty hard work ethic from the beginning. So when I was young, I was, cleaning rooms, I was taking care of the lawn, helping my dad with pretty much anything and everything, and being exposed to that lifestyle. So the entrepreneurial lifestyle, that was all I knew growing up. Before that, my dad was actually, he sold used tires. And so they then transitioned to property management, which then transitioned them into eventually buying our own place in the Dells and expanding that. So a big part of my childhood was spent working and understanding how business from a foundational level operated. And it was interesting because my dad never really like sat me down and was like, oh, Matt, like this is, what we're doing here. It was very much like I was just hanging along and riding in the truck and, doing things that they needed to have done in a way that I got to observe and to witness. And I think foundationally what came out of that for me, besides just understanding the importance of hard work, was understanding how to treat people was a really, really big one. But practically, as it relates to being an entrepreneur, just like understanding the foundational block and tackling of what, at the end of the day, no matter what business you're in, no matter what you're doing, what are the components that you can fall back on that, to me, feel like they're at the core of any sort of business. So that's a little bit about that. And then from when I was in high school, I moved to Madison, Wisconsin, which was about an hour away from where I was in the Dells, to go to high school. Stayed there for college, went to UW-Madison and studied business. And then from there, traveled for a while after college and eventually made my way to Colorado for a couple of years. Came back to Wisconsin, and then that's when I started YumButter.
Nice.
And I was there for a while, and then kind of brings me to present.
Any siblings?
I've got one brother. He is 45, so he's about 4 years older than myself. He took a different path, so he was in the entertainment industry. So he was in Los Angeles, and that's why I knew about Air One, because I was coming to see him. And I was always super interested because back home, I mean, Madison was fairly alternative. We had some really good co-op scenes there, but it wasn't as like a Los Angeles and Air One. So anytime I would go to visit him, of course, with my interest in where it was, I was always so excited to go. And that's where, I was introduced to Air One. So that's why I was actually out in Los Angeles. It was because of him.
Lots of actors are in Air One. They can't afford the food, but they're there. So
Yeah, he wasn't into the acting side of things. He was more into the production and music. So he was there for actually about 25 years and just recently moved out. So
nice. And so what did your parents expect of you? What do you think their hope was?
The expectations. That's a great question. I would say that my parents' truest expectation of myself was to do my best. And I was thinking about this because I was actually talking to another coach yesterday, a woman who we're in conversation with. And I was letting her know that ultimately my parents supported me in a really, really amazing and beautiful way. And I think that in return, what they asked for was that I just apply whatever it is that I have, my inherent gifts and the gifts that I cultivate, and go back to the basics of treating people well, doing my best, and doing something that contributes to the world in a positive way. I think that'd be my answer.
Got it. So you graduated from college, and then what was the next thing that you've done?
After I graduated, I decided to take off with a friend to Europe, and we went to Europe for 8 months. And it was like we had nothing planned. I remember we the first night we got into Prague, we didn't have a reservation. We didn't have any sort of currency exchanges and stuff like that. And that was we just flowed the whole trip. So after that, we came back. We said, let's keep the party going. So we moved to Boulder. And this was back in 2005. And moved to Boulder for about a year and a half. And then it was at that point in time where the gentleman who I was traveling with and then was living with in Boulder, he came up to Fort Collins. I decided to go back to Madison. And that was pretty much the path after college. And then from there, I actually started Inside Out Wellness. So Inside Out Wellness was before any of my food endeavors. And for me, I started to get into holistic health, and of all sorts of shapes and kinds pretty much in college. And then when I came back, I started to study with Paul Chek. I'm not sure if you know of Paul Chek, but he's kind of on the fringe, but in my opinion, someone who comprehensively has put as many of the pieces together as I've found as it relates to someone's overall health and well-being. And I got deep into all the practices and all the different courses and all the different offerings that he has. And so I started my own practice. And it was primarily based in doing a lot of movement, kind of coaching with people, but grounded in therapeutic rehab, then deeper into the nutrition. And this is kind of now getting into a little bit more of like overall trajectory of how I see life and what I'm about. And ultimately, when I was there, I was realizing that like, oh, okay, so I'm really working with people in a physical way, and I'm helping them move their body appropriately. And I'm supporting them and guiding them the best way I know how to teach them how to listen to their body, to understand what to put in their body. But I'm capping out. And so for me, the next place was like, okay, I want to be able to be of service to people the most I can. And I'm only reaching this limit. So I said, what's the next level? And the next level is the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. And that's really then where I began to dive deep into a lot of practices. I started studying with a shaman for 10 years, really understanding kind of the different powers and the ability to kind of connect into different energies to help there. Started studying psychology. And then for me, that was really when my own path of personal growth started to really amplify, because I said, okay, I can only really go with people where I've been myself. And if I want to be of the most service to people, then I have to take myself to the core, and I have to dedicate myself and my being here of knowing me so I can know them. And that was for me the deep why of really to dedicating myself to personal growth and transformation on a level that was to be of service to other people. So then from there, I started my practice, Inside Out Wellness. And my goal there was basically just to introduce people to the foundational principles of, hey, let's pay attention to our sleep. Let's pay attention to how we're moving our body, our thoughts, the type of water we're drinking, all these kind of core components of health, and see what can happen from that. Because I think that if we start addressing those, a lot of these other things that are potentially aiding in you, whether it's, we've got these aches and pains, you can't sleep, you're depressed, constipation, whatever the hell it might have been, you start to see it go away. And then after that, I was starting to make food for my clients. So that's actually how I started to get into the cereal revolution. And I was into sprouting and dehydrating. I was into, 100%, just kind of whole food organic. And so I was making the food, the kind of the classic story, right? You're making the food for yourself. And then I was just giving it away to my clients. And they were like, oh, this is really great. And so one thing led to another. I found a really cool model at the time that was not out there. It was called the Wisconsin Innovation Kitchen, which was the first, primarily only place in the US that was doing small scale processing. And it was done primarily by people with disabilities, which was amazing. So it was about an hour away, because Wisconsin has a lot of really cool resources as it relates to food. And so I was contracting local butternut squash from a farmer and local aronia berry, and bringing in as much kind of whole food, vegetable-based stuff, processing it, drying it, and then I was packaging it. And I was doing all that myself. So I was running Inside Out Wellness at the time, did the little cereal line. And then at that point in time was around when I was introduced to Adrian, who became my business partner with YumButter and Homeboy's Food Movement. And we were introduced under actually it was a local forager at that point in time when Whole Foods still had that position. It was a woman, and she said, "Hey, you guys are cut from the same cloth. I think you're, really interesting and would love to connect." And so I connected with Adrian. I was like, "Hey, here's what I'm up to." And we really bonded on the concept of creating a business that was the type of businesses that we wanted to see in the world. We had just read Let My People Go Surfing from Yvon Chouinard. Tom's Shoes at that time was just kind of that buy one, give one model was just starting to become something where not everybody really adhered to that. I took him to, I used to have a rock garden where I'd go stack rocks. And it was my meditation practice. And I had this, just massive garden with all these different boulders and small stuff. And I'd just go there and stack them. And the next morning they might be done. So I said, "Hey, come on over to my rock garden." So Adrian came over. We had an instant connection. And I said, "What do you think about joining forces and doing this together?" I said, "Let's do this." And so one thing led to another. We're like, we're in. And that's when the Homeboys Food Movement was born. And so then I was doing Inside Out Wellness for a little bit and doing the food line. And then it got, where I was just working 90 hours a week. And I said, okay, I'm going to make the, bridge the gap. And then decided that for me, and even to this day, which is cool that it's resurfaced in what I'm doing now, I said, I'm going to take Inside Out Wellness with me. And I don't have to have a business card. I don't have a shingle. I don't have to have a physical building. But wherever I go and whoever I interact with, I can share that love that I have for what that is. And so that's why a lot of the platform with YumButter was of that vein, because I was trying to channel my passion and my purpose through now a nut butter platform, right? So it was like, great. At first, it was like a direct one-on-one service-based company where I'm working with people, but now I shifted. But I'm still on this mission, but now I got nut butter to sell. So how am I going to do this? And so that's why YumButter was really built off this brand of, love ultimately, and how we set it up with the buy one feed one program and what we did. Because we started with working with kids locally in Madison. And then we expanded it out to folks in Chile, Guatemala. We were the third B Corp in the state of Wisconsin. And so we were doing whatever we could to basically say, hey, guys, we think that business can be run differently. And we want to do our best to show that it can be fiscally responsible and sustainable on top of doing all these good things, as opposed to we're doing all these good things and we're not making any money and we're not paying ourselves and our employees aren't happy, which tends to happen a lot when you've got too much of a grandiose mission, but you're not grounded enough to actually know how to run a financially stable company. So I got off track there a little bit, Yuval, but I think that may have put some of the pieces together. So I'll pause there because I feel like I went on a little run.
No worries. It's funny. I do know, I've heard of Polchek. I don't know much about him, but I have heard of Polchek. I think there's an institute that he's got, that he started. It was more about kinesiology, I believe, that he was, working towards. But anyway, I'm happy we started with hat number 2, which is the health and wellness hat. I think that's a great hat to start, because in business, what I've learned is that when you start a company and you become an entrepreneur, and if you focus all your efforts on building the business, and you don't pay attention to the first 2 hats, which is self-love, we'll cover that in a bit, and health and fitness, then your business will fail. And that's the funny part, because we feel as entrepreneurs that if we just focus on the business, right, it's going to work out. But if you don't have the energy and the mindset and the philosophies behind running that business, right, then that ultimately will be your downfall. But and I love Inside Out Wellness. I love that name. Let's start off with, were there any pains with running Inside Out Wellness? What did you discover as a first-time entrepreneur before you went off and transitioned over to a CPG entrepreneur?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost is being a solopreneur and having to do it all. And at that time, I was in, my mid to late 20s. The classic, you don't know what you don't know, which was everything at the time. And, for me, a lot of times when I look back, I'm like, how in the hell did I make it through a lot of these situations? Like and not to jump to YumButter, I want to go back, but even like looking at that, like we didn't do any research on the CPG industry. We didn't even know we didn't know anything about the pricing structure. But what we did know is that we were fueled by passion, and we had an openness and a humility to figure things out and just be like, and to show up to people and be like, we don't actually know what we're doing, but we're okay with that, but we're here to figure it out. And so, with with um, with Inside Out Wellness, I think the big challenge was working on the business and working in the business at the same time, and balancing those things of like, man, I'm like super tired and I need to like figure out how to promote and get more clients, and also developing my skills alongside of that, and paying for continuing education, which is expensive, and figuring out, like, at that time, it's like, okay, do I invest more in myself and further my skills? Do I put that money towards marketing? And then there's just the lot of the self-doubt that comes up into it as well, which is like, okay, am I really making an impact with these clients? I want to bring value. Are they paying me, a significant sum that I kind of perceived at that time? So am I bringing this value to them? Is this, and then just kind of the whole notion of how can I grow this? Is this sustainable? I don't want to be banging hourly, individual hour sessions for the rest of my life. So like all of those types of things. And I think too, not understanding, I had a decent idea of how the economics may work, but I didn't really play it out long term. I'd rented a really nice, beautiful space that was in this fun part of town because I wanted to have an environment that felt and matched, what I was embodying and sharing and offering to people. But that was expensive too. So then I would like basically just break, even on my rent, and like, okay, now it's like, shoot, we're 3/4 of the month or 3/4 of the way through the month, and just the grind, and in keeping that positivity up, I think, is also challenging. Like, you're in an environment where you're there to support, and you're there to inspire, and you're there to guide, and you're human too, and you're crushing. And it's like, so when you absolutely don't want to be there, and it's now the 6th session of the day, and you got to put your happy face on, what does that actually look like for you to be authentic alongside of, also being of service and to being a guide to people. And so showing your humanity in a way that's still professional, but like, I think there's a really beautiful, and you kind of spoke into that before we started, about how do you remain completely transparent and open and vulnerable and real, and still play within a professional boundary that doesn't then kind of flip it and turn it into a therapy session for you, or make it like it's, I don't want to say healing yourself on them, but I think in that environment, it happens quite a bit. So those would be some of the early challenges for sure of Inside Out Wellness.
It's so funny because entrepreneurship is such a glamorous business from the social media front, right? When you're looking, or the media front in general, you're seeing these CEOs having a great time. What young entrepreneurs don't realize is 95% of the time that you spend building a business, growing a business, that's the tedious day-to-day work where you have to put on a smile, where you have to encourage a team, where you have to show up for a client, and you don't want to be there a lot of times. A lot of times you're like, oh, that is not what I want to do. My passion is creating this, putting out that, helping the world. But the realities of it, until you get to be that Richard Branson, where you can just have fun for the most part, it takes years and years and years of grind and dedication. And I think you saw that in your initial business. But then you took entrepreneurship to a whole new level, and you became a CPG entrepreneur, which is even more difficult than a regular entrepreneur, I feel, because now it's not in your hands completely. Now you got to deal with distributors and brokers and retailers and shoppers, and the message of one-to-one is very different than a message from one to many, which is what entrepreneurship in the CPG space is. So YumButter, you have a good, direction of naming your brands very well.
Thank you.
YumButter is a great name, and it also tasted incredible.
Awesome.
So
Thanks.
you had this catalyst of bringing the CPG brand up to life.
Uh-huh.
What were the initial lessons learned with YumButter? What did it take to be passionate about food and then actually manufacture, produce, distribute, and market that to the public?
Yeah. Whew. So initial lessons. So looking back, I would say one is, wow. I think the biggest lesson overall was to ultimately step back and see what that path was going to be. I guess I would have put so much more research into things than I did, but in a way that it almost would have prevented me from going into the space, if that makes sense. But I wish I would have balanced it a little bit more, because I think we would have been able to be a lot more efficient, a lot more effective, save time and money. So that for me was a big one, which was, okay, that's awesome that we were gung ho. We were like, we're going to do it. We're going to save the world. We're going to jump into this space that we have no idea about. But balancing that and saying, okay, so now where does the research and the R&D and all that type of stuff come in? The other lessons was that really understanding what it's going to take from me physically and mentally and emotionally. I knew it was going to be challenging. I saw my parents go through some very, very hard times. So I wasn't naive to the complexities and the difficulty of running a business, but I didn't really know to the extent, and I didn't know what that pressure was going to feel like. And as soon as we started to take financial, income from people when in investment form, and then all of a sudden, like, I had personal guarantees on all that money and everything like that. I think that for me, another big lesson would have been to really, really, really sit down and understand the economics a little bit more, as opposed to go in with, okay, this is the plan and this is how, like, we really feel it's going to work out. But planning for the worst case scenario, and if you're okay with that, then proceed forward. And that was another big one. I also didn't understand all the different, and this kind of goes back to the parts, just the difficulty and, like, the nuanceness of a consumer, the psychology of a buyer. I was in my own head being like, well, this tastes good to me. And, I like this kind of stuff, and this branding looks kind of cool. And I feel like we've got a good story. So, man, others must think that's the case too, right? Not so much. And I think that was a really, and it's so funny, because I have applied that concept to most stuff now, which is like, okay, I feel like I have a decent idea, just a little bit, of the mind of the average human. Like, how they look at things, how they perceive the world, how they interact with things, what are their behaviors and their preferences, and how does that map onto the offering that you're giving. So I would say, like, those are some of the initial lessons, and just to also be okay with ambiguity, with not necessarily knowing all the answers, or a lot of uncertainty was another one. It's just like constantly riding in this massive pool of uncertainty and ambiguity. So,
you brought up a twitch. I thought I got rid of it, from from my miserable days in CPG, but that story just brought that twitch back up. I will say, I will say that you could not have convinced me otherwise when we started Luvala, the skincare line, that we would not be successful, that we would not be the next L'Oreal. And the reason why, and heed the warning, entrepreneurs, your product and your baby is ugly at times, right? You got to understand that. It's not always beautiful. And just because you think it is, we thought our product was stellar, which it was. We had a French skincare line, right? Best of the best, best formula, checked all the boxes, organic, vegan, animal cruelty free, certified up the wazoo, the whole thing. We put everything on the packaging, which was a mistake, by the way. We put everything on the packaging. The packaging was gorgeous. We spent, I don't know,
It was beautiful. I remember. Yeah, totally.
over $100,000 on an agency to put to create packaging that was glorious. And the website cost us $60,000 for a website back in 2005, and that's how much website cost that much, because we didn't have Wix, right? And it was just an incredible showing on the shelf, and we failed miserably. Okay, and we failed miserably because the customer doesn't see it your way unless you tell them so. And to tell them so costs you a lot of money. And if you don't have the money to support your launch to larger scale retailers, you are going to get discontinued, which was what happened to us. But you were, I mean, that was pretty impressive. I don't know if we even got to as many stores as you, 4,500 stores. What were your challenges when you were experiencing that growth velocity?
You hit on one of the biggest ones, which is not understanding how much it was going to take to support the turns and the sales within the store. I think for me it was like, great, that was the mountain peak of just getting in, and I was like, oh, getting in is like the starting gate, not necessarily like the end. And to me in the beginning it was like, oh, we hit the holy grail, we got into Whole Foods Southern California region, amazing. It's like, well, that's just the beginning. So I think that was a big one. Had no idea how to manage and budget, and also didn't understand the nuances of really establishing the relationship with the store itself and with the buyers. I think we were so focused on whether it be the distributors or the brokers, not necessarily understanding the true dynamics within the store, and how all the promotional stuff worked out. And that's, I mean, where Promo Match came in, right? Just that whole strategy, and then start mapping it out as things scaled, and having them just figure out how they all work together, and then balance that with all the cash flow, because it's like, oh, they're buying off invoice 4 times a year. So like, we're not even making full margin for 24 weeks. And then they're doing spot buying. And now so all of those different components, had no idea that they were all going to need to be looked at and addressed when scaling. I would say the second big one that we learned was just a classic line: slow down to speed up. And so with the pouches, and the fact that we were pioneering the pouches with nut butters, we had gone through a decent amount of R&D, but not probably to the extent that I would do now, knowing what I know. And we had an initial launch on the West Coast, and I would say 50% of those pouches leaked, because basically that oil can permeate through all sorts of seals. So if there was a tiny bit of oil, even anywhere in that initial seal, it would create a channel leak. And so that was massive for us. And I think I had the understanding of, all right, we want to capture the market, we want to be first to market, and then we can really have that competitive advantage. And I still see stuff, like for example, the 140,000th bar that still comes on the market, right? And somehow they get distribution, it catches, and they're successful. And I thought the bar space was completely packed in 2005. Okay, almost 20 years later, people are still doing bars, and it's like, you got to be kidding me, right? And it still works. So applying that concept, I would have gone execution over timeliness any day, right? So great, be the 50th pouch on the market. And if you execute better and you have a better plan and you're well funded, chances are you're going to be more successful than if you were the first, didn't have everything quite dialed in. And so I would have probably slowed things down significantly in a way that was like, nope, we're going to stop the growth a little bit here, and we're just going to fine tune and hone. We're going to find a system of all the different dynamics that really work, and then we're going to hit the gas. But when things are popping, and all of a sudden you go from being in your 2 co-ops in local Madison to 500 stores on the West Coast, it's like, this is it. This is what we're doing. It's working. The dream's happening, And then all of a sudden it's like smack. And then you get the reality of okay, so that would have probably been something I would have for sure done differently.
But you got to admit that first PO, that large PO, the $20,000, $50,000 PO that you get,
Yeah.
that's a good feeling.
It's the
That's
best
a
feeling.
really,
Yeah.
really good feeling.
Yeah.
Before knowing that 6 months later you're going to get discontinued from that retailer, but for
For
now,
sure.
for that first time, it's just so good. I
Yep.
remember the first big large PO we had was from Whole Foods Rocky Mountain. It was for $25,000, and it was sizable at that time for us. And then we grew into most regions of Whole Foods, and that's the scary part, is that when you outgrow your ability to support the stores, that's when you that's when you get into trouble, because trade spend, and that's what's called, trade spend is the amount of money that you spend on your expense line, on your P&L, to support your retail distribution and sales. And part of it is the ability to promote, and part of it is the ability to pay to play, because you have your everyday low prices and slotting fees, and then you have deductions coming through, which no entrepreneur is ready for. CPG, first time entrepreneur, is ready for, because then you have your shortages and your spoilage and returns, and you're like, what the hell? I'm supposed to get a check for $10,000 and my check is $300. Where did $9,700 go? And
Yep.
those are just deductions that are coming through. But here's the issue. I think, just in agreeing with what you were saying, the cards are stacked against you, and the people and the players that are there supposedly for your benefit, that are supposed to help you, are actually not. They're helping themselves first. Now, this is a blanket statement, guys. I know. I'm not saying all people are like this. I'm not saying all brokers and distributors and retailers are like this. They're not, but we're talking general now. In generality, the brokers care about themselves first. So what they're going to do is they're going to try to convince you to have as many promotions, as many sales as possible, because they know that when there is a sale, more people will buy and they get a fatter check as a commission. They don't really care that long term you're going to lose your ass and you're going to go out of business, because for them, there's another CPG brand that's right around the corner that they can, work with. Okay. There are very few brokers, one of which is a partner of ProMesh. I'm going to give them a shout out. Space Station CPG, Corey and Kimball. Shout out to you guys. It's all about transparency. When you have brokers and distributors who care about the brand, they work with the brand and they allow them to, maybe they're not going to make a ton of margin initially, but they're going to work with the brand so the brand can succeed and they can have a long-term relationship with them. But that's not the norm in the industry, and that's a shame. And I think you got to kind of go through it. You got to be a CPG entrepreneur to understand the ups and downs. I will say a final statement on CPG entrepreneurship and just what it takes. Find yourself the right people, I call them Sherpas, to climb Mount Everest. Because you can climb Mount Everest, and chances are you're going to die. So that's why you have a Sherpa, okay, to help you avoid the falls and certain death. And so and I'm not saying even with a Sherpa, you can die, but there's less of a chance because they know what they're doing. So mentors, partners, those that you really trust that care about you will go a long way. Now, let's move out of that segment. Let's move into relationships. When I met you, I believe you were married, correct? Okay. Any kids?
No.
Okay. How was that in terms of, because I know how difficult it is to not only be married, marriage is difficult as it is. Two people with different goals and ideas coming together and living in under one roof. But now you add the pain and the frustration and complexity of a business on top of it. How was that for you? Did you get the support that you needed? If not, how important is support for an entrepreneur? Tell us a little bit about that relationship.
Yeah. So I would say that, it's interesting because my mom and my dad were entrepreneurs together. So that was the model that I got to see. You work with your partner. And the woman who I was in relationship at that time was not an entrepreneur, was supportive in her own way, but also didn't quite know really like what it took and where I was at in the stage of the business and like how difficult it was for me. So I would say the biggest way that it affected our relationship was financially. In the early days of YumButter, when things, were still getting going, things were really, really, really thin. And so I was working literally 90-hour weeks. So what does that do? That increases my stress. There's less time connection there. And I'm focused on keeping that relationship alive as opposed to the relationship alive, with my life partner. So it was challenging, and I would say that if the economics were different, I think that would change things significantly, but not fully. In terms of the support that I was needed, I would have to say, and this is probably really difficult to admit, is no, I didn't have the support that I needed. And it was interesting because this person was also going through an incredibly unique period of her life as well. She was much older than me, so she was going through her midlife changes physically. And so there was like a whole bunch of concoction of emotions happening because of physical changes. And I was going through a whole bunch of emotional and mental changes. And so those didn't really kind of work out too well. We, grounded our relationship in love and support, and then eventually realized that, it was probably best for us to take different paths. But I would say that for me in that time, it would have, hindsight's always 2020. If maybe she was in the business and if how that might have changed certain things ultimately, but yeah, it was a lot because I was doing everything I could just to hold on for dear life myself, let alone be there and show up and support and also be open to receiving the support that I needed and an understanding. But I think the financial pressure was the one that just stomped on her neck.
So we learn a lot from our mistakes. What would you recommend to young entrepreneurs who are newly in a relationship, married, etc., who are entering the challenges of this ride that they're about to embark on? What would you suggest in terms of relationships that they could do to at least allow for a greater chance of success based on
Yeah.
what you've learned?
Yep. I would say, which I think can be applicable to a lot of different situations, is setting up the container in a way that really begins to speak about the potentiality of things that could happen. For example, hey, love, this is going to take a lot of time from me. And so how are we going to deal? And what is it that you need from me if you start to not see me home for dinner? Or what that looks like. What is it that you need from me that's like a complete non-negotiable? How can we begin to speak into the things that we know might be the case? When I get super stressed, here's how I would love to be supported. When you get a little bit frustrated, how is it that you would like to be supported? How can we establish a method of communication now when things are good so that when we get into those challenging times, we already have a roadmap? Two is set some boundary levels. Okay, I'm going to be in this for, at least I need your commitment for 1 year. At 1 year, I'll reassess this with you and we'll see how things are going. But are you able to at least say yes to me going into this venture for 1 year? And this is what that support can look like. Great. So now we've set up a contract, a verbal contract, and I'll even times write it down too, that says, okay, I know that you're going to support me no matter what for 1 year in this. And then we can both renegotiate to see how this is working for us if we bring in kids or however that might be. So I think setting things up like that beforehand goes a long way. Letting them know like, hey, if we ever hit this amount of, if we ever see this happen or hit this amount of dollars in our bank account or something like that, then that will trigger us to have a conversation. But to really put things into the space that allow there to be enough understanding and enough structure and enough commitment to navigate when things kind of start to get really tricky. I think that would be one. And then also, I think this is the most important, and this would be something that I said to Adrian, and I think it can be extended to your intimate partner because business partners and intimate partners pretty damn close. I would say that for us, we put our friendship and our relationship above everything else. So when things get super, super challenging, okay, what's the most important thing here in our life? It's you. The business is amazing and all that type of stuff, if that's what you decide. Some people, that hierarchy gets flipped and the business does become more important than the relationship. And then that's, whatever unfolds from that is what unfolds, but establishing what's the trump card. And for Adrian and I, the trump card was, no matter what, come hell or high water, you and I, how we're treating each other, how we see each other, how we're going to show up for each other, that is the number one thing. So when we're in the throes of it and things are really, really challenging, it's like, okay, what do we need to do to maintain this? Because above all, that shit is great, but that doesn't matter at the end of the day. This is more important. And so I think to answer your question, to kind of wrap that up about relationship, is to demonstrate that and to let that person know, hey, love, you are the most important thing for me right now. And if you ever see it, if ever appears that it's not, let me know, because I want to remind you how much you mean to me. I also want to ask for your support in that I'm going to take some of this energy that potentially could be channeled towards you, and I'm going to shift it over here to this other relationship that I'm going to have in my life called my business, which might look like another girlfriend, but it's not, right? I'm not cheating on you with her, I promise, right? And then, but be patient with me, because I'm going out on a journey. I'm going to start to this quest called, my new business, and this thing is going to take everything from me that it's going to take. And I know I need to know that you're there to support me, because I'm going out to battle. And that's really how I see it. It's like, entrepreneurs, like, you're going out to battle. You got to gear up. You got to kiss the babies goodbye, and you're going out into the battlefield.
Yeah, absolutely. In 2010, I was about to lose my marriage, and I'm still married to Allah. It's been, 2004, August 29th, we got married. We've known each other a year and a half prior. But as beautiful as our love is and was, I was about to lose that marriage. And when we started communicating again, and through a therapist at that time, because the business will do that. The business will take precedence over the spouse or relationship at times. I would suggest over communicate. Don't under communicate, over communicate. That's number one. And number two, understand that there's hat number three, and that's your relationships with others. And the reason why there's hat number three is because, I always say, there's no balanced life. Life isn't balanced, no such thing. But what there is a balancing act, and exactly what you said. Sometimes the spouse needs your attention, and you got to shift it away from the business or from other, exercise, whatever it is. Like sometimes one of your hats will need attention. Don't neglect it. Take time from other hats, put it into the hat that needs the attention. And sometimes the exercise hat, the wellness hat, or the entrepreneur hat, that might need attention, and you have to ask others around your life, in your life, to give you that grace. But if you can try to find some sort of balancing act, juggling those balls throughout the week, which is why it's so important to schedule time for multiple hats throughout the week, you should have enough money in the bank account. And that saying about the bank account. So if you deposit into a bank account and you withdraw, right, you're good. But you got to make sure you have at least more than $0 in the bank account, because you can't withdraw if it's zero. So you got to deposit, then you might withdraw, then you deposit again, and that's a great lesson that I've learned along the way.
Just on that quick, I love that analogy. I use something similar. I call it like the credit card versus the debit card. And I say, what do we do with credit? We're potentially spending money that we don't have. If we withdraw our debit account, Capital One doesn't know that I've got $0, but I got to buy my groceries, right? If I go with my debit card and I go and I don't have that money in, I'm not going to be able to do that transaction. So in life, I see a lot of us going to the credit system. We're actually not depositing, like you were talking about. And what comes with credit? Interest. And you know what interest looks like? It looks like fatigue and cancer and all that stuff. So that's the hard life interest, and that's way more than 19% when you're not paying your monthly balance, right?
Matt, you brought up the other tick. I was in $1 million worth of debt with $300,000 of credit cards,
Oh
paying at
man.
that point 29% interest
Oh.
on those credit cards. And I'm telling you, you do not want
Uh,
to base your life on credit. Better use a debit card if
uh,
possible. And if you
yeah.
are using credit, make sure that there's enough money in the bank to pay
Yeah.
off that credit on a monthly basis if you want to kind of take a loan out. This is getting really interesting, but let's move on to the
Cool.
other side of relationships
Yep.
because, well, it didn't work out at home. You were struggling.
Yep.
So your relationships with your partners and workers at the business must have been incredible, right? Because you're spending all this time there. How did that go?
I would say with Adrian at YumButter, ultimately, I am incredibly proud to say that even to as recently as yesterday, we're still texting, we're still in communication, we're still supporting each other, and our initial commitment to each other still stands. So don't get me wrong, like any other relationship, it definitely had came with a lot of its challenges. But I would say that from now doing what I'm doing and understanding how people actually treat each other, it blows my mind that when I looked at like kind of what we were doing, I think we did a really good job. But it also came with a tremendous amount of challenges, especially when stuff just wasn't working. And, it's like, okay, what do we got to do? And then the hard part for the both of us is like you were talking about before was what happens when your interest wanes? When like, man, screw this, like we're getting just our butt kicked, we're not paying ourselves, the sales velocities are not at all where they are going to be, and we got a monthly bill that we're not going to be able to figure out how to pay. That's when things get kind of tough. And then it's like, well, what are we going to do in the business? What's our specific roles? And there's the role that nobody wants to take because it's the crappy role, so who's going to take that? And so I think that for the lessons in the business relationship, also extended in applying the same kind of methodology that we just talked about, is establishing those same types of parameters, having the communication like they are your life partner, but they're your business partner. And I think so many people don't see them as being similar, in a way that they could even be more complicated, because now you're even bringing in a whole bunch of other people and a bunch of other money and a bunch of other pressures and stress that you don't have in your maybe your lifelong partner, or your relationship partner. But yeah, definitely challenging for sure. But I think with the intention of keeping our relationship at the center of and the top priority, it helped us really navigate some challenging times.
So you're no longer with the company that you founded.
That's correct.
Why is that?
I would say to answer that question at its core, it's because I fell out of love. I wanted something different. For me, I'm such a heart-centered, passionate person, and the game that I signed up for without kind of knowing initially had changed so much that I was no longer having fun. And I was no longer interested in doing what I was doing every single day. And for me, if that's the case, it's time to do something different. It's very hard for me to follow through and to do something and to commit to something that I'm not fully invested in. And so I was happy, I was excited. I had learned so much. I mean, I always say that YumButter was like my entry ticket to the game. It really beat me up so bad that I'm like, okay, cool. I feel like I was initiated. It took me 14 years to get initiated, but I felt like, okay, that I needed to go through that in order to do what it is that I'm going to do, and beyond and beyond. And so when I had that realization, that I was no longer deeply in love with what I'm doing in a way that like I was, for the first time, I was getting depressed, Yuval. I was like, I don't even know who this guy is. And to me, that's the first indicator that I need to do something different. And of course, with all the obligations and the commitments and all the stuff that you've invested in, how do you unwind a lot of that stuff? Where do you go when you've put 14 years of your everything into a project and you realize that you want to shift gears? And so for me, I always knew I wanted to get back working directly with people. That's always been my passion. And I just, with the YumButter opportunity, I wanted to have an idea of how to scale something at a bigger level. But what I realized was like I was using a very unique and odd platform to try to channel really what it was that I wanted to do fully. And that was work directly with people, talking about the things that matter to me the most. And that wasn't like YumButter wasn't ultimately the appropriate platform for that. So I shifted and decided to, start my integrative coaching company, Subtle Distinctions, which I'm doing now, where it's like, yeah, these are the conversations that I've wanted to, have. And now I'm just giving myself permission to have a direct channel and a direct platform to do that and not have to code it into a jar of or a pouch of YumButter. So ultimately I fell out of love.
It's an interesting time. We are officially closing Luvala, the skincare line, December 31st, 2022. Okay. It's been a long and wonderful ride. In 2012, we lost our retail distribution and we were on a path to pay back all of our debts. We didn't go into bankruptcy because I did not want to not honor my debts. I basically said, why should the bank cover the mess that I got myself into? And so we spent a lot of time when we shifted online to start paying off the debt, which we have, and getting through the inventory that we've purchased, et cetera. So now we're closing, and it's going to be an interesting moment because it is a death in a sense. It's a friend, it's a loved one that you've been with for so many years. I don't know how that's going to be for my wife, who's been running the business, and for me. But how was it for you when you walked out that door for the last time, knowing that YumButter is going to continue without you? And even though you might have been excited about potential future endeavors, although you probably didn't know what you were going to do at that time, what was that like for you?
It was really, really challenging. And there was other factors kind of at play in there as well. But I would say it was a double-edged sword. There was a sense of excitement, a sense of relief, anticipation, and then there was a sense of letting go and handing over something that literally had my entire essence in it into the hands of others that I didn't, it was questionable on what was going to come of it, right? But it was a good practice for me. It took me a while, Yuval. It took me a while to really disconnect from it. And it's funny because I still eat YumButter all the time. I've got pouches in my bag and everything like that. People on some level still have associations with me and YumButter, but when I see it now, there's a remembrance of oh yeah, that was my thing. And, of course I have a connection and a love to it, but I've fully disconnected from it. I have fully disconnected from it in a way that, I don't know, it's like a chapter of my life that was incredible. And now it's almost not that it didn't happen, because of course, it was such a huge monumental moment for me for these 14 years, but it's on some level too, it's never existed. And I'm great, I'm doing my thing. And it's funny because I've also released that from my identity in a way that when I'm doing either speaking engagements or working with companies, I don't even like to reference it a lot of times. And my business partner, Lynn, would be tell them what you did, and, tell them what happened and the fact, all the different stores. And I'm yeah, it doesn't even matter to me anymore. Like it's like that doesn't even at all elicit anything to me that would feel like I even want to share. So it's interesting. I think the stages that I went through was a sense of mourning for sure, a sense of sadness, a sense of wonder of kind of like, and then you've got that whole identity process happening too, right? Because for so long it's like, yeah, that's Matt, it's the peanut butter guy, right? Or it's like, and then having that kind of also shift because now in my world, like no one even knows that about my history. So it's like that I've stepped into a new space where I've made a new identity. I would say at the end, there's that journey in and of itself is a beautiful one too of letting go and releasing and really not attaching to that whole thing and realizing and sitting back and be like, what an incredible journey this was, in a way that like I get to start something new. And I think also we get so tied to having like, well, I have to dig deeper in because this is what I started and this and that. And I'm like, letting go of that has allowed me to let go of so much other stuff in my life and just to like, yeah, let's keep reinventing yourself, keep being fresh. Like, where are you at now? Because you took 14 years of this, apply all of that stuff to where you're at now, and that's like just incredible value, right? I mean, as I would say, like I got paid to do a 14-year PhD in
Yeah.
life. Really, ultimately, was what it was. So now go take that and leverage that. And so, yeah, that would be my healing slash transition journey in regards to moving on and transitioning from young.
I love that. It just goes to show you it is a journey, it's not a destination.
Uh huh.
Every low and end is a beginning to something new.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it that way, it's never an ending. It's a transition into something potentially great and incredible, which I know you transitioned to. So I'm going to switch topics. I'm going to
Okay.
move to hat number one, which I know is one of your favorites. It's the golden hat, and it is the soul, self
Mm-hmm.
love. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the hat that is most important, at least in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's mindset, belief, self love, right? It's so important and critical to the ability to get up in the morning and tackle the day as an entrepreneur and as a human. You've been in the trenches for many, many years now, probably almost 2 decades at this point.
Mm-hmm.
What lessons have you learned about your values, character traits, principles, and their relationship to self love and to the mindset of believing in yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were correct in that. That's my favorite category. I would say that for me, in specifically in business, and this is something that going back to the very initial, well, not the initial, but what I mentioned earlier about in terms of learning the block and tackling, learning the basic components of business by working with my parents and applying that to like the values and the characteristics and the principles and the virtues is that I think that if you can, I'm a very much a virtues based person as it relates to integrity or courage or patience or respect or thankfulness or gratitude or all of those and live by those principles. I think in the business world it's going to be really challenging because you're going to get asked all the time by the universe to question or to challenge what you really believe and what you really think. And it's gonna be easy for you to bend just a little bit or to like, yeah, let's just like let that one go for right now because it's gonna be so much easier for me just to like let that go so I can have this in the short term. But in the long term, I think the biggest lessons that I learned is if you can show up in business and practice and demonstrate those at its highest level. And of course, there's going to be times where we could do better or that we fail or that all of that type of stuff. But to me, that is the truest sense of how to be a successful entrepreneur is to deepen, first identify what are those for yourself? What are your own core values? What does it actually look like for you to demonstrate them? And then from there, how do you apply them to all aspects of your life? And in this case, into your business, because, people do business with people. Relationships are at the core of business. And over time, that reputation will win out. And over time, people will want to do business with you, and some stuff just happens for you to be honored and recognized for your decision to continue to live in that way. And it might not look like what you think it's going to look like, right? But I think at the end of the day, for me, when I go to bed at night, I can go through my mental checklist and say, okay, well, really, what is it that I have in this life? Well, I have my word, I have my integrity, I have my reputation, and that's really it. And so if I can't go to bed saying that I did my best in those areas, all the other stuff of how many stores I was in, that stuff just flies way, way off the radar. So to me, I think it's just monumental to at least dedicate yourself to embodying and practicing that in a way that is, I don't know, to me, that's a big portion of what I think we're here to do.
I love that. Matt, I can speak with you forever. I have one more question before my
Yeah.
final closing question.
Yeah, of course.
Otherwise, we'd be a Joe Rogan show, 5 hours.
Right.
And I don't have enough listeners to tune in that long. So, all right, a spirituality question.
Uh-huh.
Okay, because I know if hat number one is not your favorite, hat number seven, the spiritual seeker is.
Yeah.
So there's a famous Zen quote that goes like this: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Mm-hmm.
After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Mm-hmm.
What does that quote mean to you? And can you relate that to your life's experience as an entrepreneur?
What that quote means to me is that I think that there's an image, there's an idea of what spirituality looks like, tastes like, dresses like, where it goes, out to eat, all of that type of stuff. And at its core, I think we forget that the foundational principles of the deepest practices of spirituality is to be present and to go back to those virtues that we talked about. So what is chopping wood and carrying water? It's a simple discipline that is incredibly difficult, that's not glamorous, right? When we get up and we're reverent to a practice and to a desire, and we're doing something that doesn't have this appeal to it, that at its core is, to me, one of the deepest expressions of spirituality. I always say, you can be, I like to kind of break people's framework sometimes of what they think. I said, you can be a smoker and you could be a drinker and you could be eating McDonald's every day and you could be the most enlightened person on the planet. You don't have to be wearing your mala beads and drinking kombucha and going to static dance on Friday nights. And so that chop wood, carry water to me is like the remembrance that it's not about anything physical or external, and it's about this deepest kind of energetic imprint inside of yourself and how you show up and live your life and treat people.
Wow, I love that. It's very similar to, because I took a lot of time just thinking about it.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, what does this mean? When I first read the quote, I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And to me, it means that, like you said, you have a practice, your daily grind, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, you do your day to day. When you travel, it's all fun and games, but when you live there, it becomes your day to day. It doesn't matter where you go. It becomes the ordinary. And so before you're enlightened, you have the ordinary. But your day to day actually does not change when you become enlightened. You still have the ordinary. I think what the difference is, when you're enlightened, you get to appreciate the ordinary way more than if you did prior to being enlightened.
Yep. I love that, the appreciation too. And that is, to be able to look at the things that are seemingly unimportant as the most important, or to look at the things that you've been looking at every single day and just be in utter awe of how beautiful they are, and to look at the people that you interact with and to see them as the most divine, perfect expression of creation, and just to be in gratitude and be in appreciation. So I thank you for bringing that piece into that.
It's interesting because you're thinking of Zen monks, right? I mean, their entire life since they're kids, they're doing the exact same thing every single day. But I can just imagine them just appreciating it more and more and more as they get older, right? That morning breakfast, and then meditation, and then doing their mandalas or whatever they're doing all day long.
Yeah.
and just getting to appreciate it more. And I think we can all learn from the Zen monks, I think, or any monk. There's a lot of lessons to be learned. So I'd like to close out my interviews with the following question.
Okay.
Who did you have to stop being, and who did you need to become to manifest your current success?
Stop being in order to become. It's awesome. I just did a speech last week for a company, and I had this exact same thing. How do we suspend disbelief in order to stop being? Who do we need to stop being in order to become? I love it. Okay, so let me take a second here. How did I stop needing to be? I'm going to take it to maybe a different level, and I'm going to say I needed to actually transcend the idea of self, that Matt, this apparent being identifying as Matt in this body, is anybody having an effect on and doing certain things, and to become this open vessel for me, and this is how I feel like I'm designed to respond to whatever it is that life is bringing me in a way that is in the flow and is kind of where I'm being led. So I had to basically get out of an identity of what I think I should be doing, who I think I should be, how I should be acting, what it should look like, and all the shoulds and all kind of the boxy mold of the kind of identity as I was in the entrepreneur, and just step back and realize and strip all that away to become ultimately, the fullest expression of myself in a way that is free from pigeonholing myself into a picture that is very limited because of my perspective. And we have such limited perspectives of ourselves, and yet we're so diligent on trying to craft that. It's like we have this minuscule idea and view of who we really are and what we see ourselves to be. So how do you just get rid of that and to be something that okay, what is so far beyond my knowing, and how do I create the space for that to come in?
Matt, you have come such a long way since the first day I met you at Air One, demoing your granola.
Yeah.
And now you have not learned from your first or second business. You went off and started your third, subtle distinctions. Yeah. So I know, because you're such a well-rounded individual and can help so many, tell us a little bit about subtle distinctions and how the Seven Hatters can connect with you and receive all that you have to offer.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that, Val. So, in essence, Subtle Distinctions is a platform that I've co-created with another amazing human being and my new business partner, Linwood Paul. In essence, that takes everything that I have gathered over the last 41 years of my life, and specifically blending in the wellness component and the business component, and intersecting them in a way that is to be of the most service to individuals and business teams primarily, in a way that we create either custom experiences or programs that are rooted in all the things that we just talked about, all the different virtues based, but that really has the practical and tactical application in a business. So I'm infusing, it's a personal growth experience embedded into a professional development context that can bring in all the dynamics from all of our collective experiences. So my business partner is 67. He's had a whole amazing different journey. I've had mine. So we have been very, very grateful to work with some incredible people, some incredible teams. And ultimately, what we do is we help people get more of what they want, less of what they want, increase their self-awareness, understand how to take care of themselves better, and really create high-functioning, performing teams in a way that brings in all these different elements that is unique to a lot of businesses these days, but also is completely accessible and that they can interface with and they don't see as weird or woo-woo. It's there, but it has the undertones of all of these principles that we've been talking about. So you can check us out at subtledistinctions.com. You can email me at matt@subtledistinctions.com. But ultimately, if there's anything as it relates to a human being, that's where we love to play. And I would say our specialty, is per se. But we've been having an incredible time, and I'm so blessed that I have been able to create a space for myself and for others to be in that and actually have that direct platform that I was talking about earlier to be with people and be of service in that way.
I'll make sure that all the links are in the show notes.
Thank you.
Matt, you're an inspiration.
Thank you.
I just, most of all, your ability to grind it out and get up after being punched in the gut multiple times and still keep on getting up is a testament to what a real entrepreneur is. Entrepreneurship and success as an entrepreneur are not the financial rewards, the accolades, the 30 under 30, 40 under 40, whatever you want to call it. Those are nice perks. But a successful entrepreneur, to me, in my definition, is someone, whether they succeeded or failed throughout their whole life, doesn't matter. If you've never succeeded once in your whole life, the ability to get up every morning and do what you need to do to have that hope of success, right? Keeping that hope alive and not giving up, to me, that's success.
Thank you.
And I know a lot of successful people who have never made money, achieved any fame, but they get up and grind every single day.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I want to kind of make sure that I reflect my absolute 100% truth back to Yuval. And it's funny because I would say when I look back on my whole journey with YumButter, there's probably like under 7 people that really stand out. And you are actually one of them because we've had such a fun little unique relationship. And I want you to know too, that I completely see and also think the same about you as it relates to your persistence and your dedication. And I've seen you through even just the inception of PromoMash and the iterations of like beta testing PromoMash and then, even Nuvala and now with the things that you were just telling me about beforehand about the new products that you're launching and even the podcast. So I want to know that it takes one to know one. So I see you, brother. And I really appreciate the opportunity to have connected here and to share our stories with everybody and ultimately just hang out with each other. So
I love you, man. We'll have you back one day again because the stories are endless. Thank you, Matt. And we appreciate you. Thanks for being a guest on the 7 Hats.
You bet. Take care. Thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Matt. Let's end today with a show segment that I refer to as What Can We Hang Our Hat On? And here's my takeaway. Matt is now an accomplished entrepreneur with 15 years of experience under his belt. But his journey started somewhere else. See, I first met Matt in 2008 when he was a CPG, consumer packaged goods entrepreneur, demoing his brand YumButter at Air One, which is an exclusive natural market in Los Angeles, California. I was also a young budding entrepreneur myself, sampling my brand Luvala. I remember locking eyes with Matt, and we've become friends ever since. What I love about our friendship is that we share similar experiences growing our brand. I often speak on how difficult being an entrepreneur is, and being a founder of a CPG brand adds a level of complexity and difficulty that contributes to the 80% failure rate in this industry. We were both part of this statistic. Matt's brand was acquired and we officially closed down Luvala after trying for 16 years to make it work. Our initial dreams of building great brands and taking over the world did not work out as we dreamed of. However, as I often say, there is no destination in life, just a myriad of experiences, good and bad, that make up your journey. Matt took his years of experience and transitioned into a servant leader, helping other entrepreneurs avoid the pitfalls many young founders experience. I created PromoMash, a company helping brands navigate retail and keep their products on the shelf, something I could not initially achieve. The moral of the story is that so-called failure, if complemented with a never-give-up mindset, allowed Matt and I to keep building, growing, and creating new successful ventures that help others. On Matt's website, spelled out in bold, is the following phrase: redefine diligence, deepen engagement, build resilient growth. That says it all. I want to thank Matt once again for joining me so that we can all benefit from his wisdom. And until next time, if you found this episode helpful, please hit that subscribe button and tell other entrepreneurs out there what value you received from it so that we can attract even more high-quality people into our 7 Hats community. So for now, I will bid you farewell and success on your journey. And until next time, my name is Yuval Selik, and I tip my hat to you.